The power of NQF, or National Qualifications Framework, seemed to have extreme strength worldwide in the area of qualifying education data in many countries. What is actual potential of this system and how you can be part of it? Mr. Mislav Balkovic, the Dean of Algebra University College in Croatia, will tell us more about the topic. Please welcome him with a round of applause.
Thank you all for joining. Maybe topic is not so hot as some other data science topics, but I'll try to skip because we are kind of running late. I'll try to skip maybe part of it and then focus on the value that National Qualifications Framework are being kind of creating for all of us. In this now less than 25 minutes plus 10, the idea is to cover shortly through education and how and why people standing behind kind of concept of qualifications framework think that it's important, what national qualifications frameworks are, data behind it, and basically how this could influence all of us and probably will in those countries more focused on their implementation. So just to start with the introduction and with the kind of meaning and real value of knowledge, this sentence says that the progress of any nation could be no swifter than the progress in education. Is something I'll show you later also with some data. Kennedy used it in front of the Congress in 1961. It was more than 50 years ago in order to change American education. And basically, importance of education was really stressed during the economic crisis of 2008, which lasted longer in some countries. Basically, the data supporting this was from this survey, which was done or published in 2017, using data from 2008 to 2015. And basically, it covered countries struggling with number of unemployed. And these 8 countries were selected because they show completely different scenarios that have been taking place in them, and also we can later show how knowledge really influenced this. So basically here you can see the percentage basically of young people who are unemployed in different countries. You'll see Greece, Spain, Italy and Portugal really hitting high on unemployment rates of young people, while other countries were much less hit. And basically from this same survey, which covered more than 8,000 people, institutions and employers involved, basically the question was whether employers have problems in finding people with appropriate knowledge. And you will see that in those countries which are down and which are kind of in pink, there are those with higher unemployment rates. And paradoxically, in those countries where many people were unemployed, employers reported that they're not able to find skilled people to employ. Okay, that's their side and their perception. Students' perception from the same survey was pretty much similar, and basically you will find that less than half of young people finishing higher education actually believes, or at least stated, that their higher education significantly helped them in developing careers. Number, of course, is different in different countries, but it's still very high. So basically employers and young people were at the time very unhappy with what they are getting as a skill set. But the question is whether it's just a perception or there is some other kind of view. And the third group were the group of providers. And you will see that 35% of employers think that universities are really preparing young people properly. Roughly the same percentage of young people would share the same kind of attitude, 38% of them, while 74% or twice as many universities think that they are doing a good job. So actually there is certainly a difference in attitude of those using the knowledge, those basically presenting the knowledge to employers, young people who graduated, and the providers. And this is the knowledge at the end of the educational process. But even more severe consequences are visible in this survey, which is done by OECD in 3 rounds, starting in 2013 and finishing last year. Basically, it's called PIAC, and in this PIAC research, they were researching 5,000 people in every of 38 participating countries, trying to measure their level of literacy, reading, numeracy, and problem-solving skills. And these were people from 16 to the end of working life. And basically, the questions were like this. You have the sneakers, and you enter the shop, and they say that these two are as a group of 2 articles in a special promotion. If you buy one, you can get the other one for half a price. And people were asked to calculate what would be the price. They could have used the calculators. And different areas were kind of questioned with different questions. This is just one example. And basically, results were fascinating, and I was actually in Brussels when these results were presented, and this was very embarrassing for some. The results are saying that basically level of knowledge that have been measured through 38 countries using this OECD approach, which was universal in all of those countries, covering 5,000 people in every, shows that in Italy, people with tertiary or higher educational degree has slightly less knowledge than people in Japan finishing only secondary school. And now remember the high percentage of people getting unemployed as a young unemployment a few slides ago, especially in Italy, Spain, and some countries. So basically, these results actually when they are put like this, would say that in normal countries, roughly 1 in 10 people will really score really high. In countries with a better educational system, 1 in 5 will score really high in this kind of measurement. And in Italy and Spain, 1 in 20 will score really high. So the differences between Finland and, let's say, Spain in the level of knowledge that you will find in everyday people working in any company is roughly 4 times. The difference is 400%. It's significant. And this was pretty much a beginning of the era of National Qualifications Framework in their transformed focus of changing educational systems and changing the way how the knowledge is being delivered. So, actually maybe one more thing. This is interesting research presented for EU Commission in 2014. And it shows longitudinal research of 50 years of data of knowledge kids are showing at the end of primary school. This is kind of PISA or something similar. 50 years ago, we didn't have PISA. Saying basically that if this is growth of GDP in a country, and this is the result, this is now normalized PISA result, but basically this correlation says that countries with better primary education actually will get for every 50 points, 1% of GDP growth bigger than the other countries. There are no correlation in level of natural or any other kind of resources that the country has, which is strange. There is no level of duration of education. So countries with education which is longer for 1 year are not really getting better results or better GDP. Only those who are really producing knowledge which is measured in this kind of way. So basically all these slides were here to show you that political and other implications of knowledge are significant in our societies. And this is one of the last slides for the beginning, showing basically how UK voted to remain blue or to leave EU without going into any kind of evaluation of whether this was a good or bad decision for UK. I will just show you the link of these two maps, and here is the percentage of university-educated people in constituencies which voted. So basically in Scotland and in part of Britain, where people had like 60% or so of them higher education, voted to stay, and in those areas where there is a poor educational background, they voted to leave, although they at the end of the day significantly influenced their lives because they lost their jobs, although they thought they're not going to do. Pretty much this is the same thing, showing that every spot in Britain is one place or one kind of county where they voted, and basically number of those who are without education is bigger in this area, and percentage of those who voted to go out or for Brexit was higher. So you see correlation. The similar things showing the vote in Trump elections in US shows the difference in education and who voted what. So I'm again not going to say that any of these are something which is good, good or bad for any of these countries, but it shows significant connection between education and what happens in a specific country. So to illustrate idea of NQF now being put in a slightly different context, the idea is that basically if you have a company needing someone to work as a programmer, which is occupation, this person would have to have some kind of ICT competencies, some skills and knowledge the person is able to apply. And these are in most cases certified through the qualification, through the diploma that someone is bachelor or master or whatever of, let's say, computer engineering. And this kind of degree could be obtained in some university. The same goes other way around, that universities are providing qualifications, equipping people with some skills that in theory should take them to be employable in different occupations, and then they would get work in some companies. Basically, this is not something which is very intelligent and very complex. Things that are new in qualifications framework is that basically what, at least in Croatia and in many countries, we don't have is the list of really required skills for these different occupations and of learning outcomes that you are going to get as a result of some qualification. So basically, these two as a public documents would help educational system better understand companies through really set of documents that are useful for them. And current state of play is, this was taken from 2015, but it didn't change significantly. Basically, in most of the countries in EU, some level of implementation of national qualifications framework is being already done. And if we look at the world, then it's being implemented in more than 150 countries, some kind of NQF. But the thing is that basically, if we look at whether countries have NQF and what kind of qualifications framework they have and how competitive the countries are, then we'll see a strange thing, that basically those more developed countries have pretty much national qualifications frameworks that are just informing people. They're not very kind of trying to change education. On the other hand, low competitive countries are those where the national qualifications framework are being used to change educational systems, Croatia being one of those also. Some of European countries are more in communicating frameworks and some are in transforming or reforming frameworks. So basically, as the country is getting more developed, the frameworks are becoming more loose because they already have good responsibility in all the areas of education, so they don't need something like this anymore. So in a nutshell, the idea is that learning outcomes, those elements of knowledge that you show after the education, are through qualifications framework being put and recognized as a unit of knowledge in some knowledge management system. And now we are slowly approaching the data. And basically, in different qualifications systems, you can select or you can attribute to each learning element of knowledge level. You can say how many credits it has in ECTS or whatever, in which area of knowledge this is. In some countries there are sectors, in most countries actually there are some kind of sectors like mathematics and I don't know, computer science and different others. And also there is a quality, whether someone was really a good student and really managed to pass this with a great marks or not so well. So basically in different dimensions those elements are being kind of positioned, and for each of us it's a way to actually then show what we are capable of doing. I'll really skip most of these complicated things because we lost some time at the beginning in order to basically show you a few examples, and with this I will basically finish. These examples are visible on the web. Most of them you can really approach and see what is being done in different countries. ISCO is the first example I'm going to show you, and ISCO is European concept of showing links between skills, competencies, and qualifications. And basically, if you visit the page, what I showed you in this kind of from company X to university, this whole route is being done in a way that basically ISCO actually already has, as a result of people from different countries working in a working group to develop documents showing what kind of knowledge is required. So if you say, okay, let's see whether there is occupation of data scientist, and you will find many occupations linked to this area. There are currently 2,900 occupations being kind of explained. And then when you enter into specific occupation, you will see that basically these occupations are being kind of grouped in hierarchical level, which is called ISCO, International Standardization of Occupations. But basically here are the skills, like essential skills for and competencies for this occupation, like, I don't know, develop data processing applications, essential knowledge. Skills are those, and competencies more applied, knowledge are more theoretical. And then those which are not essential but are kind of elective. So there are like 50 areas of knowledge. And when you go into data mining as one of these, you will see some data about it. And also you will see the list of other occupations that are using the same element of knowledge. Basically, it goes all the way to qualifications and to the study programs. Idea in Europe is to use a system like this in order to really code the knowledge behind each and every degree, in order for automatical systems which are already running actually to help you with your CV and just the information that you have, I don't know, bachelor of something in some country, generally to know what kind of knowledge you have as a result of this qualification, plus everything else you list in your CV, and to do the automatic match to the open vacancies in European portal EURES. So the second example is basically one that I'm going to show you in a few slides. This is Skills and Jobs Explorer. This is the task our team of scientists did in European Big Data Hackathon last year when we win the competition against all the scientists in this competition representing European countries. So basically what we did is we got the data from Eurostat, which were unstructured data from the CVs and open vacancies provided to us and to all the teams. And basically what we did is that we used the data in order to show what are the skills supplied and what are the skills demanded. Supply skills were those from unstructured CVs. Skills that are demanded are from job posts and open vacancies. We used ESCO, which I showed you, as a kind of key to as a taxonomy to each of the elements of skills in order basically to use this unstructured data and to kind of make it more structural. And then using different levels of grouping of occupations and skills, we actually showed how the skills were distributed for countries where they provided us data with. So this is transitional matrix, which is very often seen in different other areas like finance. So basically in ISCO, there are 9 groups of occupations. And we tried to show, according to the data, what happened with the people and their careers. So basically, you will see that people with career in area of professionals, which is the highest level of aggregacy, basically, out of the whole database, most of them actually, when they changed their career, again, worked as professionals in the same group, just maybe in another company or in another kind of job. But also there were transitions from, like, many people from managers moved to a second position, which is managers, but many, almost the same number, changed the career to become professionals. And then you can drill down through the occupational levels to see actually from each occupation, people were changing to which occupation, and then you can group also according to the countries and the regions and so on. This was important to see the move basically of skills. And maybe a few more. When we did it, we actually, for specific occupation, managed to find actually 150 or so skills. And this was the data set of some 50 million records. And basically the same now you can see in ISCO, but the number of skills per each occupation is slightly smaller. It's like 50, but it's still enough. And then maybe last one slide of this system, which is available online and was result of the hackathon in Brussels, was basically that we wanted to see in which countries people from Croatia were kind of trying to get employed, and in which particular occupations. In order for, and the system actually did the prediction of the skill shortages in Europe and the move of the required skills. And what we learned is, for instance, that some skills will not be really in high demand in the future in Croatia, but will in other countries with more developed economies. So that's why now we are seeing people with certain occupations are moving more to those hubs where this kind of industry is present. And maybe just to conclude, there are other two cases. One that directly could show you how deep the water could be. This is Unistats. This is open statistics from UK. They use like 5 or 6 data streams in order to compare and help people better distinguish between university programs and to better and more responsibly to select the careers. What I did here is basically that I selected out of list of 50 data science bachelor programs in UK, those that I wanted to compare. And when you get into comparison of the programs, what you could do is to use the comparison in different areas. So you can say, okay, show me how the user satisfaction is different in these programs, which is part of a survey. And you can see that students of data science program in university, which is listed here, are more kind of happy than those in some others. But what is even more important is to see what would be employment results and what would be the wages. And basically these data are provided to the Unistats by Labour Ministry of UK, where you can actually see what would be expected salary 6 months after the course, how many months you are going to wait to get your first employment. And then you can also distinguish not only between what would happen with your career if you select to become data scientist in different universities, but how your career might end up if you decide not to be a data scientist, but maybe to be computer engineer or maybe some other occupation. So there are numerous data that are available. And maybe really for the very end, what we have in Croatia to support qualification system is basically that for each of our sectors, this is data which is available online. You can see for Croatia for the past like almost 10 years, even more, for 2000, for each of the sectors, and I purposely selected here the sector of computer science and electrotechnics, that in this sector 34% of people with qualifications are in computer science and 65% in electrotechnics. And basically you can see what degrees they have. You can see how many occupations there are, and then you can, for instance, see what are the key areas or key occupations in which they are going to get employed. So many people with this particular qualifications would work in sales, and in this area the numbers are huge because there are people with degrees selling TV sets and things like this, or some solutions. But also the biggest area for them is education. And then you can of course drill down to see specific qualification and where the people will get. And then what we use and this is really something I'll finish with. What we use this for is to basically plan the educational investment in the future, because very often those changes in the labor market are slow, and the past trends are good predictors of the future trends. So in a way, you can really, as a government, predict where to invest and in what programs you need to train more or less for people not to get structurally unemployed. So I will finish here just with the conclusion that helping educational systems and labor market data are now playing kind of crucial role, and different countries used it differently, but basically in most cases they are provided free and open to public in order for people to use them to do informed and responsible choices of their careers. It's easier way than to use them to kind of force institutions to kind of do something differently than they would like to do. But when you have people who are educated and aware of the opportunities, then very often they do the better choices. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have some questions? Since we have a time, you can freely ask. Yes? Can you just pass the microphone?
Is there any correlation between the GDP and the higher education, like high school and universities?
I didn't get the first part of the question. Is there any difference?
We've seen the correlation between primary school education and GDP.
Okay.
Is there any correlation between high school education or university education?
Unfortunately, no, in this sense, because it's hard to measure knowledge at the university level. So at primary school level, those areas where the benchmarking is being done by OECD and similar organizations, they are focusing mostly on 3 or 4 areas. Mostly this is foreign language literacy in your mother tongue, and then there is mathematical analytical thinking. In most cases, they are kind of problem-solving skills. They are kind of 3 areas. And then what is the kind of mostly used measure is the knowledge of the kids aged 15 and a half to 16, which pretty much corresponds to the results of the primary school and first year in the secondary school. In higher education, it's hard to measure. And then what I showed you, this PIAC, which started in 2013, which is how to measure and benchmark people in already employed. Sometimes they graduated just from secondary school, sometimes in higher education. They tried to use the similar thing. But basically, it's hard to kind of measure unless you then really get into specific areas like in medicine, and then you would have to distinguish between knowledge in medical doctors in, I don't know, one country versus another. I didn't see that anyone did even this kind of benchmarking, and then to use this to try to find the correlation between these results and the GDP. I'm not aware of any research that would show something like this, unfortunately. But it's hard to measure also, to be perfectly honest.
And what about maybe satisfaction with the university and GDP?
What British are doing is, I think that Unistats is one of the best examples that I have came across. And in order for this to be reliable, they are not trusting universities to do the surveys. This is first thing. You as a university need to make your students do the national survey. And if you don't get enough respondents, then as a university you have a problem. And I have personally visited universities when they were advertising to students, please fill in the national survey, because if they are not getting like 35 or I don't know how many percent, and every year they are asking for more, then you kind of have a problem. And then when you have this kind of surveys, which most countries don't have, then you can use them to distinguish. And what you will find here is not the GDP, but it's the wage and ease of employment of different students from different programs, where you can then, in this comparison, use satisfaction of students as kind of measure or as a filter. But this kind of surveying the satisfaction is not something you can benchmark with another country. Or at least I also don't know that there is any things like this. Maybe this could be done as a project together with some of the portals for students or things like this. So in this sense, this might be an interesting project, but not that I know of the results that someone published something like this. But it would be interesting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is it possible that countries with higher GDP actually invest more money in education, so the correlation doesn't imply causation?
Yes, that was exactly one of the kind of hypotheses which was taken into consideration with this research. It's a huge report. It's a big think tank in Germany doing this for European Union. And they, at the end of the day, kind of managed to conclude that the investment was not the key element, but actually the knowledge. Now, you can, of course, always say that the knowledge would be better if the investment was bigger. But then if you take data on investment in teachers' wages compared to the GDP, then you will see that there are countries investing more or less, but basically results are not correlated very kind of as a very visible correlation between investment. Even in countries which are with the GDP which is lower, it's a negative correlation in a way that they are investing more, but the results are poor, which is kind of counterintuitive. In those countries that are with higher GDP, more investment means in general slightly better results. And this investment is always measured as a percentage of gross cost of a teacher versus basically what average person would get as a gross salary, like of GDP per capita versus what is the wage. So it's not in absolute numbers, but it's always compared to the rest of the society.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, do we have some other question? Once again, do we have some other question? Okay.
Thank you very much.